This comment says, our dog had a bad experience with the groomer as a puppy and he's been terrified ever since. They go on to explain that they have to pick him up and put him into the tub at home, that he's panting a lot, and that they generally try to take care of his grooming needs at home, but that because of his breed and his grooming needs, he does have to occasionally go into the groomer to have grooming taken care of. And they say that their vet prescribed an event medication to help with these events, but that they see it as a failure and are asking my opinion. So I want to start off by saying that this is such a hard situation, right? Because this is a situation where we're trying to balance our dog's physical hygiene needs and their physical health with their mental and emotional health. I think one important thing to consider is that these things are not separate. So when our dogs are experiencing toxic levels of stress, survival levels of stress, fight, flight, going into that complete shutdown state where then they're exhausted afterward, that is a physical health risk as well. Experiencing chronic stress of that nature has physical impacts. It impacts the immune system. It impacts the GI system. It impacts the ability to handle and process pain. And so dogs experiencing a level of stress regularly where they are going into a freeze state or one of those other high stress states is a physical health issue as well. When we're talking about situations where the dog is panting, for example, like when we're doing the grooming here at home, that is still an incredibly high level of stress. The dog is panting because their heart is racing. They're adrenalized. And so think for a moment about how stressed you are if your heart is racing about the experience that you're having. And so those events as well are in that grouping of stress responses that are bad for the dog's physical health as well as their mental and emotional health. And so in regards to the event medication that the veterinarian has prescribed for these situations, it's absolutely not a failure to use that medication. It is necessary not only for their physical and mental well-being, but for their physical health. Chronic stress impacts the immune system in ways that can lead to everything from allergies to cancer. And so if a veterinarian is saying that it is appropriate to use event medication to keep the dog's stress levels outside of that toxic stress level zone, that is definitely a recommendation that we want to follow. And I think, unfortunately, there is a lot of messaging in some groups of popular dog culture that say using medication is a failure. It's absolutely not. I think pet professionals making other people feel like following their vet's recommendation to support their dog's emotional, physical, and mental health, I think that's a failure on their part. I think it can be helpful to think about what we would do for a child or even for ourselves in those situations. And mammals have pretty similar nervous systems. Dogs are social creatures just like humans. And so this is a fair comparison to make. If you were going in to have a procedure done that you didn't consent to, you didn't want done, you didn't understand, you were being physically restrained, you were having this experience that is physically and emotionally unpleasant, incredibly unpleasant, that is sending you into this high level of stress that impacts you for days afterward, and that builds up the negative association. So each visit is more and more and more stressful. And there was an option to be supported with sedation. We would absolutely use that for ourselves. And so we should absolutely give that kindness to our dogs. The other piece of this is that there are other things that we can do as well. And this is important around things like grooming and veterinary care, where this is something the dog is going to need for the rest of their lives. And every time they have a negative experience, that negative experience gets stronger and stronger. And we can absolutely get to the point where the dog is not able to have care done unless they are fully anesthetized. And in some cases, we can't get the dog fully anesthetized because of handling concerns, and the dog just isn't able to have vet care or isn't able to be groomed. And so we want to avoid that. And so there are also things that we can do through behavior therapy to help change the dog's association. Event medication can absolutely be part of that. We can also do things like helping the dog create positive experiences with the place they're going, whether that's our bathroom or the grooming salon. And the trick is to break down the criteria to a place where the dog can be curious and in their thinking brain. So if my dog is afraid of the bathroom, won't go anywhere near the bathroom, I might, for example, just start doing pattern games or giving them calming enrichment as close as they're willing to get. And not with me luring them, but as close as they're actually willing to get. And then slowly increase that until we're doing these activities in the bathroom. I can work on desensitization and counter conditioning to some of the tools, the sounds, the sensations, the handling requirements. It can also be helpful for these dogs, generally speaking, to build self-regulatory skills, to look at overall stress levels. Are we experiencing higher than ideal stress levels chronically as a baseline? It can be helpful to work on building resilience to stress. And so there are a lot of things that we can do to get these stress levels down. I got an email from a client a couple weeks ago where they said that their dog was actually happy and excited to go into the vet's office, and that was not something that they had ever expected to be able to see. And it's because we made the switch to a fear-free vet, and the dog had a lot of positive experiences there and was working with people who were able to read the dog's body language and make environmental adaptations and pharmaceutical adaptations to support the dog in having positive experiences. And so now the dog wasn't just being sedated and getting through the experience, they actually were excited to be there and having positive emotions. And realistic expectations are going to be different for every dog. I love that this commenter is avoiding the groomer as much as possible and trying to do what they can at home. I think a good place to start in this sort of situation is getting the dog more comfortable at home, getting them comfortable with bath time, and using alternatives until we get to that point can sometimes be helpful, like dry shampoo or baby wipes, dog wipes. And so it really is a balance, but there is so much that we can do, and it is absolutely not a failure to support one's dog. And I have really big feelings around the so-called pet professionals who have popularized this idea that using medication to support our dogs is somehow failing or cheating, as if them experiencing toxic levels of stress and anxiety is somehow succeeding, as if that shows something. All it shows is that the dog is having a really bad time. And we wouldn't treat people like that. We shouldn't treat dogs like that either. So to this commenter, please know you are not failing your dog by giving them the support that your veterinarian has recommended. And with this level of stress, it may take some trial and error to find the right dosage to support them through such an event. As I said, some of my clients are completely under for care that involves a lot of handling. And that's what they need to best meet their physical, emotional, and mental health needs. And again, those mental and emotional health needs are not separate from physical health.